Hello and welcome to another episode of the Gritty Hour. I have a very special guest today, Dr. Greg Brick, who is an author and hydrologist, and he explores the caves in the St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota area, and I'm extremely interested to learn more about it. So welcome to the Gritty Hour, Dr. Brick.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We're honored to have you. So, you just retired from as a hydrologist, and now you're an author. I see your books behind you. What made you interested, besides your background? What made you interested in the caves of Minnesota?
Well, it started as an undergraduate, and this would have been the 1980s and 90s. And I was looking for, you got to have some kind of research project. And I was looking for something that I could do that was kind of unique. And I thought, what about the caves around here? Has anyone really looked at them? There had been people that had looked at them, so to speak, and even including my brothers growing up. Our mother firmly forbade them to go into the caves around here are notorious and associated with all kinds of nastiness, including things like devil worship, which I do not believe that. I think that's just hype.
Hmm.
But and so I never went in these caves until I was studying geology, and consequently I was kind of like considered an old man when I started going in these caves, because most of the people around here at my book signings and stuff, they'll talk about going in these caves as teenagers and stuff. I never did that. I mean, I came into these caves when I was older and had an academic interest in them, and so that kind of made things. So I got a reputation for being kind of an academic, looking at the caves rather than a party or something. That these a lot of these caves, the really big ones around here, were carved out of the local sandstone as loggering caves, starting in the 1840s. And after they were abandoned, I can address why that happened, but it was about the year 1900. They were still used for beer, but just not for making beer. It's for drinking beer. So that's where I came in. That's how I came into the picture.
It sounds like it would be a perfect place to store it. But for someone who has a pedestrian knowledge of it, is it run by the state, or who maintains the caves, if anyone at all?
Oh, no, not at all. No, that so what happened was, the reason there are caves at all is because these German brewers, immigrants, came here. Milwaukee is famous for the German brewers, and a lot of this. I used to live in St. Louis, Missouri, and there are brewery caves down there too with German immigrant brewers, and I visited those caves as well. But they dug them out because these sandstone caves afforded natural refrigeration,
Right.
so to speak. It was like the same temperature year round, low temperature, around about 52 degrees Fahrenheit. And they could even chill that more. What they would do is they'd bring in ice off the Mississippi River in winter, and then stack it up in the caves with sawdust, and that would last till summer practically of the following year. And so these caves were this lagering process. It was very different from the sort of beer we had here. Before about 1840, if you said beer in the United States, you were referring to English ale.
Right.
And it was only after the 1840s that it became mostly associated with lager beer. And so most of these huge caves around here were hollowed out by these brewing companies, and then I said about the year 1900, a lot of them were abandoned because something called the Lindy refrigeration machine. And for the first time, electricity became widely available, and it was cheap enough that they could have above ground, stock houses to keep their, to refrigerate beer, and they didn't need to put it underground
What year?
anymore. And so
What year?
that's about the time.
What year was that about? When the
Yeah.
refrigerator?
So that was approximately 1900, and it's really interesting because there's a change in the advertisements about that year as going through the old newspapers. Um, After 1900, you'll see some of the advertisements say things like, "Well, we brew our beer correct. We don't put our beer in nasty, ill-ventilated caves. We have a nice above-ground operation." I found that was an interesting sea change, so to speak. The other big thing associated with uh, getting beer out of the caves about that time was this fellow in a white lab coat named Louis Pasteur.
Mm,
And he investigated the so-called diseases of beer in France. And what he found out is that, hey, in case you didn't know it, beer is associated with the yeast. It's an actual living organism, and that you only want to have one kind of yeast in there. That one kind of yeast to get the beer you desire. And a lot of the reason that a lot of beer batches go bad is something called like a byproduct fermentation. A different kind of wild yeast gets in there, so on. So how does it do that? I mean, you look at these caves in the old photographs, and they are dirty. They
mm.
are very dirty looking. So it's no surprise. I mean, if you go to a brewery today anywhere for a tour, just think what you see. I mean, these gleaming stainless steel tanks, people in white lab coats, everything is just, it's like a laboratory.
Right.
And it was very different back then. It was a very, these caves were dirty. They're still dirty. They're dirtier today even, but than they were. But and so the brewers were actually, they were glad initially for the free refrigeration on the frontier, in the 1840s and so on. But after that, when cheap electricity became available, it was much, much preferred to have everything in above ground cellars rather than these deep underground bedrock cellars in the sandstone.
Right. So as soon as the refrigeration came in, they marketed themselves as not being part of that.
Yeah, yeah, they
Yeah.
were proud of that.
Mm.
And we
Why you?
did have
Yeah.
one.
I'm sorry. I
Oh,
was
I'm
just gonna.
sorry. No,
No, it was
we.
my mistake. I just wanted to say while you're talking, there's a video of yours. I saw a
Oh,
video of you. I think it was on YouTube, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to show that video to give people who are watching us on YouTube a little bit of what those caves might look like. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'm just gonna run it with the sound down while you're talking, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we did have a few late holdouts around here.
Hmm.
And there was a brewery called Jorg's Brewery, again, a German brewer, and he managed to hold out into the 1950s. And he still proclaimed he had a cave aged beer, but they went out of business. I'm not sure if it's exactly connected with directly cause and effect there.
Hmm.
But they were the last ones to hold out as being proud of their cave aged beer. And they left, like the others, they left an enormous cave that they tried to rent out to various entities like plumbing companies and storage companies. And uh,
Hmm.
so, as to get back to your question about who owns it, you know, it's just the landowner above that.
I
So
see.
the state has not taken them over or anything like that. Um, they're unwelcome, so to speak. They're unwelcome appurtenances of the property that go along with the property
Well,
nowadays.
you intimated before that a lot of these were not natural. They were man-made caves, specifically for
Oh, they
storing.
yeah
Yeah, like the video we're
yeah
watching
no they
now.
were.
I was going to say the video we're watching now. Is this one of those man-made caves that you're in here?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
definitely. This unfortunately, this video as I'm trying gesticulating here. Um, this video does not do justice to this cave. It was in 19. It was in its heyday. Um, at turn of the century, and it was the site. It was compared to a medieval cathedral. I mean, the
Mm,
passages were 30 feet high. And the reason I'm standing amidst all this junk is they knocked down a very high steel bridge in 1985 that crossed over the Mississippi River. It's known as the High Bridge and runs in downtown St. Paul over the river.
mm-hmm.
And I don't, I don't when I see construction sites nowadays, they carefully recycle all the concrete and scrap iron, and
Mm-hmm.
they're very meticulous about it. But as you can see here in this image, in this YouTube video, there's a lot of scrap iron there,
Mm,
and they just pushed all the remnants of this bridge into the cave to try to fill it,
mm-hmm.
and they were not successful, as you can see, because there's still people like me and others who go around exploring these old caves. It's
Well, that
also remarkable. They must have had a really bad fire in here at one time, because you can see the dense layer of soot on the walls.
yeah, and leads me to my next question, which is: have you ever, in your exploration of these caves, have you ever come across any interesting artifacts or things from the history besides metals? Have you
Oh
ever?
yes,
Yeah.
there was some sandstone caves just up the bluff from here that were associated with the brewery and were taken over as storage caves. And during World War II, you had to um, I forget what the exact reason was. You actually had to be vetted to work at this place, and I found FBI vetting documents in amongst the rubble when I explored that cave years ago. That was about 20 years ago.
Wow.
Like a little thing with a fingerprint on it, and is an official looking document. And so it was
So
one of the ideas they had.
yeah,
What was that?
I was going to ask you: did the caves serve a purpose during World War II?
Um, that's I was just getting that. It's a
Yeah.
very interesting question, because there's a even before Pearl Harbor, when America got involved in World War II, there was an article in the Maine Metro newspaper about using these caves as bomb shelters.
Ah.
And I find that ridiculous, because there was no airplane at that time that had a range, especially a bomber carrying, so heavily loaded, that could go from Europe, fly this far into the United States. And why would they be concerned with bombing somewhere in flyover country? They
Mm-hmm.
when they had their choice of targets on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Um, and then later on, in more sensibly than in the early 60s during the Cold War, it was considered, um,
Fallout shelter.
it was mapped as a fallout shelter.
Mm.
And that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah. Well, sure. That makes a lot of sense. Sure. So, what else have you found? You must have because you're a long-term explorer of these caves. You must have come across a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, so you can, sometimes you can deduce the use of the cave from some of the artifacts that you find in them.
Right.
I think a lot of the people around here, when they hear of me exploring these old brewery caves, they immediately think of eBay. They think,
Mm.
"Ooh, I'm gonna get some old bottles. I'm
Mm.
gonna get me some, really valuable old bottles
Mm.
and sell them on eBay or something." And I haven't found that kind of memorabilia um, in the caves. But what I have found artifacts that indicate the use of the cave. For example, in some of the caves, you can find what look like these rows of library shelves, these wooden library shelves. But that's not really what they are.
Mm-hmm.
These are old mushroom racks, and
Oh.
so they would just be they'd they'd line the walls with these racks, and then on each of the shelves, just like a Kennett Square in Pennsylvania, they had all these shelves containing mushrooms,
Mm.
and so you can still find those kinds of things in you still find those quite commonly in the caves.
I'm looking at the
Depending
diagram.
there
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, that's that right there. That's the map.
Yeah, I
It's
was
a
gonna
quite
say it.
extent. That's a
It shows a lot of inches. It's very intricate. This cave that you're in here.
Yeah, that map was drawn in 1962 by the authorities who were looking to map the fallout shelters. They were
Ah.
looking, and so that's where all our maps of the caves around it, and not every one of, but most of the old abandoned brewery caves around here, mushroom caves, cheese caves. Their first maps, they got their first real mapping in 1962. It was like right after the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Mm.
And they figured
Okay.
they were gonna map them out and figure out how many people that they could stuff in
Mm.
these caves in the event of a nuclear apocalypse. And of course, for those of your listeners who are not familiar with Fallout, um, these caves were not meant as bomb shelters or to resist a nuclear blast because the roof would probably cave in. Even though at this point in this video, you got like 200 feet of good rock above your head,
Mm.
solid rock. That's
Wow.
how deep it is.
Wow.
But even so, that's the cave would probably collapse if we're directly at the whole idea of follows after a nuclear blast. There's a lot of uh, um, radioactive dust
Mm-hmm.
and short-lived radioactive nuclides, as they call them, that settle out of the atmosphere. They're intensely radioactive particles, but they have very short half-lives. So if you can manage to spend like a week or two in one of these caves after the blast, you should be okay.
Mm.
You can come out and you won't, and at least most of the radioactivity will have died down. Now, whether your house is going to be there, that's a different question.
Right.
If you go to Louisville, Kentucky, they have something called the Louisville Mines there. They have actually recreate that. It's a huge it was one of these fallout shelters, just like this one. But they have mannequins in there. It's a tour you take,
Mm.
and and they have mannequins, and they make it, and they try to recreate what it would actually be like for people living in there after a nuclear blast. It's really sobering. It's funny in a way because it's crude, but it's really sobering too. I mean, especially with this Ukraine crisis, and
Mm.
people start talking about flinging nuclear bombs around again. I mean, everyone is going to lose.
Yeah. No one wins in that war. What did they give tours of these caves that you explore in Minnesota, or maybe no?
No,
No.
they do. No, the city has done its best to keep people out.
Mm.
And there are some of these old brewery caves have been put to use. For example, one the Wabasha Street caves that even features in the Atlas Obscura website. as they give cave tours to this day.
Mm.
And they were, that one was not group. That was actually it was originally a mushroom cave. And they turned it, in the 1930s, it was turned into a nightclub right after Prohibition. And they call it Castle Royal.
Mm.
And it is, you can tour it. So if somebody wants to see one of these, they can go in there. It's not nearly as dramatic as this cave, however. I mean, this one is, like I said, it's like a cathedral in size and
Right.
in place where they haven't filled it.
Mm. Well, I know one of the bigger breweries, I guess, at that time when these caves were used for storing beer, and I'm glad to know they were under pressure to drink it all by the beginning of summer. Was what is it? Correct me if I'm saying it wrong. Stallman Brewery. Yeah,
Yes.
they were one of the bigger
Yes.
ones, right?
Stallman's had the largest lagering cave so far as is known in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very extensive. They were, so that so that viewers can and listeners can connect with that. Stallman's was eventually purchased by Schmidt.
Ah.
So Schmidt Brewing is a lot better known.
Mm-hmm.
Stallman's is one of those bygone brands, but um, people should recognize the name Schmidt. Schmidt, even though they're called the Schmidt Caves around here, they were never used. That was after 19. Schmidt came in 1900, and they never used those caves for lagering. It was all above ground by that time
So they
anyway.
had the
But they still,
refrigeration
but they
already.
still call them Schmidt Caves.
Right.
Um, that one was I write about in my book Subterranean Twin Cities. That was a nightmare cave to get into. It still exists today, but unlike this cave here that we, in this video, where you can just more or less, if you know where the secret rabbit hole is, you
Mm.
can go in there
And you like way the hell
at
down
any
there too.
time. Yeah. That's not the case with the Schmidt or the Stallman cellars. I when we when I went there the first time, and that was in the late 90s. It was still they were actively brewing beer there. It was
Wow.
the last urban brewery that that we had around here that had a recognized name, regional distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was the Pig's Eye brand.
Mm.
And so one of the successful method I thought up for getting into these cellars was to follow the beer.
Mm-hmm.
Now I was very familiar with the sewers around that area, the sewers around the metropolitan area generally. It's a topic of great fascination to me.
Well,
One
as a
of the things that I
hydrologist, I
figured
would
out
say.
is that,
I said as a hydrologist,
yeah,
I
it
would think so.
just,
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, the sewers give access to the caves too.
Mm-hmm.
And some, there are a few natural caves, and the way you can access them is through the sewer system. So that's kind of the origin of my interest there. But so I thought, brewing produces a lot of waste. They drain out the lauter ton, they drain these tanks and wash
Mm-hmm.
them out and all that. I thought, um, I went, there was a sewer outfall on the Mississippi River adjacent to the brewery, and I got the brilliant idea, which proved successless: follow the beer.
Mm.
And so I went in there and I literally followed the discharge, the industrial discharge of the foaming waste product,
Mm.
and followed that and followed it up and through passages and so on, until I came to the brewing cave itself where they were discharging this material. And that's how I was able to access the great Stallman cellars, the largest lagering cave in the United States, according to the literature. And so I was very happy with that. But it was not fun in the sense that you have to be willing to brave cockroaches and rats. And imagine if imagine if beer were to pour into a sewer and just sit in puddles and pools on the floor of that sewer for weeks and weeks on end during a hot summer. Imagine what that would smell like.
Oh,
That
sure.
those are the kinds of odors and sights and odors we had to go through to get to this place.
Right. And some of these caves were used for, was it for storing cheese as well?
Yes, for specifically for ripening cheese.
Uh
And
huh.
there's one kind of cheese around here that pertained to explicitly, and that was blue cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And that all came about by special circumstances. During World War II, our the Roquefort supplies from France were abruptly cut off.
Mm-hmm.
Because people use the terms Roquefort cheese and blue cheese interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. Roquefort is made with sheep's milk, and blue cheese is made with cow's milk. And so a dairy professor at the University of Minnesota figured out in the 1930s how to make this simulacrum, if you will, of this knockoff of French cheese. But he was the State Department got involved and said you can't steal this French. The French. I mean, they're very particular about their culinary experiences, and you can't call it Roquefort because that would be stealing from the French,
Mm.
stealing their. And so what he did was he went in. He called it blue cheese, and for a brief moment of glory in World War II, this metropolitan area was the blue cheese capital of the world.
Wow.
So I'm telling a dubious distinction. I don't know. Maybe we stink or something. I don't know.
Well, I'm a little slow on the draw, but now I'm sharing a photo of. It looks like the workers of the Stallman Brewery back in the 1800s. I don't know if you're familiar with this photo or not, or even the
Yeah, I
structure they're
can.
standing in
This
front of.
this is this the architecture,
Mm-hmm.
the so-called Rund Bogenstil architecture of the Stallman Brewery, which means Rund Bogenstil is a kind of rounded arch, and
Mm-hmm.
you can see that in this photograph. Another thing I'll point out is that you'll notice that a lot of these guys in this photo have beards. Now, if you were to go in a brewery nowadays, you have to have beard nets and all that stuff. Look at this. This is ridiculous. Talk about this is how they used to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
This,
that was the style of the day. This is I'm gonna assume
yeah.
this is not too long after the Civil War, or maybe within 20 years after the Civil War. This photo must have been taken.
It was, yeah, I would say it's after the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of the things is that the uh, the the breweries around here, even though they had been in operation on some level since the 1840s, it really took off after the Civil War. And that's when they made a bid to become a national brand, their national brands.
Right.
Because, prior to that, they were just these brews were just very localized. And, the products were not widely distributed.
Mm.
But after the Civil War, um, they were able to distribute their product much more widely.
Yeah. I'm gonna move on the sharing thing. I'm gonna move to your particular website, but and while I'm doing that, I want you to maybe I'm gonna do a little folklore legends you can describe to me. First thing is, where
Sure.
is the subterranean Venice?
Oh yes, yes. That is a legend among the urban explorers around here. It's not a legend. It's legendary, I should say, but
Okay.
it is actually a real place. the city of Minneapolis was famous, was the world capital of flour milling from 1880 to 1930. During that 50-year period, they had the highest production until it was exceeded by Buffalo, New York,
Mm-hmm.
in the production of flour. And all that milling, all that ceaseless grinding of millstones required some source of power, and that was the water power of the Mississippi River.
Ah.
And the way they did that is they channeled the Mississippi River water in through canals, and it dropped through turbines. And then it was exhausted through a vast tail race system, these underground tunnels that came back out to the Mississippi River. And it's that tunnel system that we call the subterranean Venice. And in particular, Venice is associated with gondoliers. And for many years, there was this big raft that sat in the canal system. These canals are flooded with groundwater to a depth of up to 8 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't walk down them. You got to have a boat or something. And so there's this raft that was on the shore of the canal system, and there was a pole there, and you could pull yourself along on this raft. And it was the raft. It was something that somebody had constructed sometime, because it was supported by a 55-gallon steel drum at each corner, the raft. So this
Mm.
was like a sturdily made thing, and you could put several people on there, and just like like Huck Finn type adventure, Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, you could pull along
And this was
through
all
this
underground?
canal system.
Underground, and it was
Yeah, it's
all,
all
yeah.
underground in complete darkness, and you could pull for hundreds of feet up and down these canals.
Wow.
And so it's kind of like a gondolier. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was dubbed Subterranean Venice. Unfortunately, what spoiled the fun was about the year 2000, the city of Minneapolis made it into Mill Ruins Park. And so what they did is they sort of excavated all the gunk out of these canals, and took all the fun out of it. And so they put bars over the canal entrance, over the entrances, so that the water would come through and people could see this in the Mill Ruins Park, as they call it today. And that was, it's very nice. It's a very nice place, but it spoiled our fun.
But the water still flows through it.
The water is still flowing through there, but I don't think that raft is long gone.
Mm.
But
Well, that's interesting. Now, I have to ask you about a legend of the giants in the caves. Tell me a little bit about that, or have you heard about that? The giants in the caves?
during the 19th century, if you look at old newspaper clippings about caves nationwide, one of the persistent stories that comes back, I don't know, it's part of the ingrained mythology of people or something, is that you can find mummies and the remains of giants in
Mm-hmm.
caves and that kind of thing. And it is the cave that around here that's most associated with that is a place called Shoots Cave. It was Minneapolis's first and only show cave. And a show cave is a cave where, like Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, you pay money and they give you a tour.
Mm.
So in the case of Shoots Cave, you used to pay 10 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these caves nowadays, it's 10, $20 or more to go on a tour. It was
Right.
10 cents back then, about the time of the Civil War. In this cave, it was, the stories about it were that when it was originally found, they found mummies, and it's just complete nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And a race of giants.
Mm-hmm.
That there's just remnants of these giants and all this kind of, and it was sheer hooey. And what we think is happening is that my book is called Subterranean Twin Cities. The Twin Cities are Minneapolis and St. Paul, and they had competing journalistic operations. And so
Hmm.
one of the explanations is that, well, we've got more marvelous stuff over here across the river than you have over there. Look at this cave. I mean, it's wow. We got and some of these articles are came out on their paper. The issue in the paper, the edition of the paper came out on April 1st of a year, which tells you something that it was purposely meant to be a joke. It's like an April Fool's edition
Mm.
of the newspaper. And so then it was kind of like a clear signal that, hey, this is complete hogwash, but it's just in fun.
Mm. So I'm looking at a picture of you. I should say, in try and prepare for this podcast, you seem to be the preeminent go-to guy on the history and the knowledge of these caves. Everywhere I look, I saw your name, and I'm looking at a photo from your website. I guess you must have given tours. Was it pre-COVID, or do you still do them? Or
Oh, this was 2012. This tour,
uh huh,
I gave tours through the College of Continuing Education, the University of Minnesota,
right,
and there this this photo is a little dicey, because it you'll notice that some of those people aren't wearing helmets, and
yeah, yeah.
despite my repeated, yeah, I said you had to have a helmet, and it looks like most of them, when they did bring a helmet, brought a bicycle helmet from this photograph.
It sounds like
um
the mask thing today. Yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of like you can tell people this is what you need, but they had paid good money to be on this tour, and
Mm.
there was, it was difficult to enforce. I've given tours to the Minnesota Historical Society. I You're right in the sense that that was a pre-COVID thing. I have not given any tours. I have yet to do any tours post-COVID.
Hmm.
Yeah, I haven't even. All my book signings were canceled when COVID, just like with every other author.
Yeah.
It's so but I do expect that I will. I these that I'm always. That's one thing that people are asking all the time. Could you can give some more tours, and um,
I should say to
I give.
I'm sorry. I should say to the
Yeah.
folks listening and even the folks watching, uh, the information I'm getting is from Dr. Brick's website, which is drgregbrick.com, and you'll find a link to that below in the show notes below both the video and audio. But go ahead, Doctor. I'm
Thanks.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the tours. Yeah, I give tours for geological societies, and for and then on the opposite side, I gave tours for the local colleges. Like we have, um, some of the more exclusive colleges would pay for, like McAllister,
Mm-hmm.
um, would pay for, a whole day of student outings. That was always fun, because then I could really talk science, and whereas here it's more just to entertain people, and I don't want to, there's not going to be a quiz afterwards or anything.
Well,
But in the case of student
what kind of geodes are in these kind of caves?
geodes,
Yeah. Do you have any geodes in
yeah,
these
if you're
caves?
talking, yeah, there are Minnesota caves with geodes, and for the listeners who I'm not really sure what a geode is, it's a vug. And for those who don't know what a vug is, it's basically a cavity, sort of like an oval cavity in the bedrock that has minerals like quartz or amethyst. Amethyst is a kind of quartz that, growing in there, and they're much in demand. I mean, among rock and mineral collectors. We do have a cave in Minnesota that is famous for its geodes, and that's called Junk Hole Cave, and it got that sad name because it's on a farm, and the farmer was tired of having people stop by all the time asking to go in his cave to look at the pretty geodes. So he started throwing junk in there to block the entrance.
Oh, so it is junk
And
coal. Okay.
it is definitely, there's junk all over in there.
Mm.
And by the time I got there, my first visit, that was like 1989. You had to like squeeze and make your way through barbed wire entanglement. He had put barbed wire, waste barbed wire. He kind of bunched it up over the hole, and so you kind of had to like pick your way through this barbed wire to get down into the cave itself. It's really sad because it's a beautiful cave, but um, his efforts to block it, really ruined the whole experience,
Yeah. It
unfortunately.
sounds like he was serious about keeping people out. That's for sure. So when you do,
Yeah, I can
yeah.
understand
When you do start them
the
up again, the tours,
liability.
would they be able to reach out to you via your website here that we're looking at? If
Oh
when,
yes, of
yeah.
course, yeah.
Hmm.
So I people can get on. I have like a mailing list, or a Facebook group is the easiest thing where I announce trips and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And But I do have a an email list. If somebody says they want to be on a tour, and I can add them to that
All
list
right.
for whenever they start up again.
Oh, I see
If
your
you're going to be
links.
in the area,
Yeah, your links are right here at the bottom of your website. Yeah.
yeah. Let's see. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah. See,
Yeah.
there's a post.
So
Yep.
if you go to dr geez, I have to have it in front of me to remember it. This is don't get old, doctor.
Yeah. No. See, I didn't. What happened? What happened was gregbrick.com was already taken. It's a cyber squatter has had it for virtually all for the past 20 years and
Oh,
has not done anything with it.
he's
And
waiting
so
for
I
you to
had to
make
put
an
a
offer.
DR in front of
Yeah.
it.
Well, you've
And
earned the
then it kind
DR.
of
You might
makes
as
it
well
a
use
little,
it. Yeah. So it's
yeah, well, I didn't want to make it sound too
drgregbrick.com.
pretentious, but
No, it's not pretentious. You worked for it. Don't worry about it. So drgregbrick.com. If you when the good doctor is ready to start tours again, you're interested in visiting Minnesota and going on one of these tours, he believe me when I tell you he'd be your man. But before I know we ate up a lot of time already, but I do want to get to some of the books you've written. So I'm going to go to your book page here, um, and I see them behind you on your shelf there. If you could just
oh yeah.
discuss them for me, I'd be interested to learn more about them.
Yeah, well, main one what we've been talking about today, that's Subterranean Twin Cities.
Mm-hmm.
And this by the University of Minnesota Press. And this more or less this talks about in successive chapters the different kinds of subterranean space under a city. And for example, there's a chapter on brewery caves, and there's a chapter on cheese caves and that sort of thing going
Mm-hmm.
through. Very nicely divides it up like that. Um, Another book is of a very different kind here, Minnesota Underground, and this I co-authored this with Doris Green. Um, this is the second edition of the book. What's different about this is Subterranean Twin Cities is all about places you're not supposed to go. Okay, no, no,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
do not.
Only
You
through the
know,
book can you go.
Yes, it's a vicarious experience.
There you go.
But this one, Minnesota Underground, this one is about places that you should go and that are open to the public.
Mm.
They have public access. It includes caves, tunnels, mines, museums, with plenty of sidebars.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you get up into northern Minnesota, and the place, fishing and hunting and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also iron mining country. And
Ah.
so there's tours of iron mines, and might want to, and know about those. And so that book addresses it very well.
Are those
Um,
generally north of Minneapolis, St. Paul area, northern
oh yeah,
Minnesota?
yeah,
Yeah.
those are what the people around here they say is up north, and I
Mm-hmm.
go, okay, that's like way up there.
Mm-hmm. Bring
Yeah,
a
that's
jacket.
like you're getting up near, yeah, it's getting up near the Canadian border and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Wear
So
a sweater. Yeah.
um, this one, yeah, Minnesota Caves. This is about all the. It's about the legendary cave. A lot of these, some of these caves you can visit, most of them you can't. It's just like the history of the caves statewide. Subterranean Twin Cities is focused on the Minneapolis St. Paul area, but this
Mm-hmm.
one is statewide. I did one on the Iowa Underground
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a one of these a guidebook to visiting. So this again, this is one where if you're going to Iowa, and they have more underground stuff than you can possibly realize.
Really?
And I drove 10,000 miles through the state of Iowa. It's not just corn. I mean, especially up in the northeast corner of the state, there's lots of show caves and places to visit
Are
underground
they
to
natural
survive.
caves or
Yeah.
man-made caves in
Oh yeah.
Iowa?
The bulk of them are um, natural caves.
Uh-huh.
And the thing about it is that in Minnesota, if you want to visit a mine, some underground mine type situation, you're looking at an iron mine. Whereas with Iowa, you're looking at a coal mine because, believe it or not, at the time of World War I, Iowa was the fifth largest coal producing state,
Hmm.
in this country. The whole they it was huge. And so they have like a lot of old coal mines, especially in the Des Moines area. Now, a lot of those are unsafe and you can't enter them, but they have like museums devoted to them and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as the odd man out, there's this one here, um, Caves and Karst, the Upper Midwest. This is a technical slab.
Mm.
It's a contributed volume. I was the first editor on this, and the chapters were contributed by others, and I wrote a few chapters in here. But
And what's the name
it's
of that?
focused.
What's the name of that book, Doctor?
It's yeah, Caves and Karst of the Upper Midwest USA,
Uh-huh.
and Karst is of course the kind of landscape that caves occur in.
I see.
And the this is more like a student's textbook because it's full of chemical formulas. And I mean, some of the authors have gone into the chemistry in such detail. I mean, even I had to really focus hard to understand what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why this one isn't on my website, because it was published. It's a Swiss publisher,
Uh-huh.
Springer, um, and they charge like 130 euros
Oh,
for it. And so
that
I
sounds like
figured
that
it's
sounds like a
not
college course
exactly,
textbook.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not like one of those nightstand books like these other ones, or like a helpful guidebook. It's something to be studied, not really read. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not, so that's why I don't have that one in particular
Mm-hmm.
on my website. But
To the right of the list of your books that we're looking at on from your website, I see the categories, and this one is interesting. What is a show cave, if you don't mind me asking?
yeah, yeah, so a show cave, um I spoke of one of them already, the Shoots Cave, which is the one in the middle there, that yellowish
Uh huh.
sort of photograph. A show cave is sometimes called a commercial cave. It is where you pay money to go in.
Hmm.
And this, uh, there are hundreds and hundreds of show caves in the United States and worldwide. I mean, you go to like showcaves.com and you can see all different countries that have show caves, that sort of thing. And among show cave historians, and yes, there are people who focus down that narrowly on things. They think cave history is a narrow enough focus.
Right.
No, so among show cave historians, I have a good friend that's very competitive to discover and know all the show caves in your state. And I recognized when I started my research in the 80s, I recognized a few here that I studied a few that had not been known as show caves. And Shoots Cave is a very good example. That says a Minnesota show cave advertisement from 1876. That
Mm.
was right after the Civil War. That is, very early in the Midwest to have a show cave.
Oh,
That
so
is,
this text here is the actual ad from that
it's
time.
like a newspaper. Yeah, it's a
Oh, interesting,
newspaper advertisement.
interesting.
So I've just translated, um, yeah, transferred a newspaper advertisement from that time, from 1876, talking about what the cave is like.
So it sounds like it was
Um,
similar to the what you were describing before about the subterranean Venice. This is a boat ride. At the
yeah,
time, it was a
it's
boat ride under Main Street. Interesting.
yeah, no, that's a good point. This is right across the river from the subterranean Venice
Mm-hmm.
area. So this was also in one of the mill tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so subterranean Venice is this complex of mill tunnels, as I explained. And this is yet another mill tunnel, but on the opposite side of the river. And
Right.
it failed as a mill tunnel. I'm not sure how that happens, but it failed as a mill tunnel. And they said, well, we put all this money into digging this tunnel. What can we do with it?
Mm.
And that's where they came up with that idea of, all the giants and
Yeah.
the mummies and all that sort of
Right.
thing.
Right.
And
Right.
so people were eager to spend their dime to come in here and get on this little take this little boat ride under Minneapolis
Yeah. Well, it
at
sounds
the
like it
time.
would
And
have been
this
a cool boat ride, though. Underground and all.
it was, and especially because they had the guide had a torch, and so you were on this you can see the kind of boat there.
Mm-hmm.
So like one of those John boats, this
Yeah.
very shallow draft, and you have somebody with a torch,
Mm.
and then they would paddle up through this mill tunnel into the main cave, and I guess tell their stories about, uh, so they figured they spent their money well.
It sounds like they all took a page
um,
from P.T. Barnum out there. Yeah.
it was very PT Barnum-ish,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
We still have show caves here in Minnesota. Of course, Mystery Cave, which is run by my former employer, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. They run the largest cave in the state,
Mm-hmm.
in southeastern Minnesota. And then we have Niagara Cave that's privately owned. It's apparently an underground waterfall.
Mm.
Well, it is an underground waterfall. I've seen it myself. I write about that in my book. And because of this, what was Niagara associated with in the early days? It was associated with romance. It was the place where you went for your honeymoon after your wedding. You went to Niagara.
Mm-hmm.
Marilyn Monroe, the movie Niagara, she went there. Oh,
Ah.
how
Yeah.
wonderful. And so this cave then, taking that association, their main thing is that they are the best cave to get married in, because it's the Niagara Association, and it's underground.
Mm.
And when I got married some years ago, they offered to give me a free wedding there. They say we won't charge you, because I guess because I had been so helpful in promoting
Well, you're the
their
man,
cave
doctor.
over
Yeah.
the years.
Mm-hmm. So in general, a show cave is then like I see now. One's This would be interesting. Tourist accommodations. So they actually had a hotel under there.
They had they had uh, they had a stand out front
Mm-hmm.
where where they sold tickets and cigars and
Oh.
birch bark torches for the tour. And
Mm-hmm.
this is back in the 1850s.
Mm, wow.
And
Interesting.
that is tremendously early for the Midwest to have a show cave, that early. The earliest show cave in the United States as a whole as a whole. I didn't, that was not an intentional pun, but it worked out. Um, was the Wires Cave, and that was and Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. That that we're going back to 1816, somewhere in there. So that's not all that much earlier.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's very interesting. I'm just going to go back to your books for a second. 'Cause I just want to ask you, what is someone just learning about this as I am for the first time? What would out of these four books on your page, where would you think they would start? With the Subterranean Twin Cities book?
yeah, if you're looking to if you're looking to visit,
Mm-hmm.
and you so I just I'm not interested in reading things. I just want to visit places and have some unusual location to put on Instagram or something. Then it would definitely be Minnesota Underground.
Minnesota Underground. Okay. Yeah.
That's the guidebook.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now if you're more sort of like armchair and you just want a broad overview of all kinds of like interesting postcard caves, uh, then it would be the one at the top there.
Okay.
Okay, so the Minnesota caves
Right.
history and lore.
Mm.
And then now if you're interested in adventure stories, and near death experiences in sewers and that kind of thing, then it would be Subterranean Twin Cities.
I see.
So
Okay.
some of the books, caves to visit, some do not visit these. I mean, these are like potentially deadly. So,
Yeah. Well, anybody that's heading to Minnesota this year, 2022, this would be a if you didn't consider it before, you're probably thinking about maybe taking a visit to some of these caves now. And if you do, I would recommend you purchase some of these books first, as the doctor recommended. Maybe Minnesota Underground first if you're heading that way for your vacation this year. And again, first of all, I appreciate your time today, doctor. I was very interested the whole time. I was intrigued by the whole thing. Um, but one more time, it's Dr. Greg Brick, DrGregBrick.com.
yeah.
You'll see more of the doctor's literature, and his links, his social media links are right at the bottom of that page. And I would highly recommend you reach out to him to learn more about the caves of Minnesota. And now I'm learning Iowa as well. But I did my due diligence for
And
this podcast, and by God, you are the go-to guy on this thing.
yeah, and my co-author Doris Green, she's written the book Wisconsin Underground, so she's got that
Uh huh.
that sort of upper Midwest area
Hmm.
covered. So
Well, um, it was very interesting, and I do appreciate your time. And like I say, we always like to get down to the nitty gritty, and this was gritty. I liked it.
oh, you have no idea how gritty it gets in
You
some.
really got to roll up your you really got to roll up your sleeves to get the work down there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say so.
Well, thank you, Doctor, so much for your time tonight, and we'll be in touch. You have another book on the horizon? Something coming up?
I do. I'm Ted. I do not have a publisher for it yet, but
Uh
I
huh.
am working. The books that I've written so far, they're more regionals, would fall under a regional category.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but a book I have in view and I've collected a lot of material for is a history of water, just generally worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many histories of water out there already. But I think I have a unique angle on it. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of like the one I have in
Well, that
view right now.
that makes sense. Your trade was you were a hydrologist. You retired as a
Yep,
hydrologist,
exactly.
so now you're a full time author, and we appreciate your time tonight, Doctor. And but when this next book comes out, send me an email, and we'll get you back on the Gritty Hour. Learn more
Oh,
about
wow.
it.
Sure.
Okay.
Really had some fun here. Yeah.
I had fun as well, and I hope our listeners did too. Thank you so much. Have a great night, Doctor.
Thanks. You too.
Okay.